is going to talk about the revolution in audience attention measurement. He is Graham Page, Global Managing Director, Media Analytics, Affectiva. Graham, please come on stage. The stage is yours. Let's give him an applause.
Thank you, Claudio. Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me OK. So my name's Graham Page. I'm from Affectiva. We are an emotion, AI, and computer vision company. And my topic today will be one of the biggest issues in media measurement and media research at the moment, which is the measurement of attention, the best way to do that, and the extent to which that is meaningful at all. So it's no surprise, and it's not news, that the media industry is interested in measuring attention. But in particular, with the rise of digital media, with the rise of ad blockers, it's a more important topic than ever before. Yet as the ARF, the Advertising Research Foundation, laments in its recent report, it's a complicated area. And it's complicated because there are lots of different models and academic theories of attention. And the interest in this space that has been generated has created a whole new set of ways of measuring attention, all of which work in slightly different ways and work in and reveal something subtly different. But everybody knows that it's important. And we'd agree. I think our view on attention and attention measurement is that attention is critical. It is a necessary step in advertising performance, but it's also not a sufficient step in advertising performance. So, we're a business that has measured consumer reaction to content for many years, and we'd argue that not only is attention important, but we need to also measure emotional engagement, because emotion is really important as a cue for attention, but it's also a means of sustaining attention, building memories, and framing brand decision-making at a later date in a more positive light. So attention is important, but there are other things as well. But nonetheless, we need to get the measurement of attention right. And our argument, I think, would be that to measure attention correctly, we should measure real people's responses, we should use behavioral measurement to do it, and we should use techniques that work in the wild or outside of the lab. And the reason I would say that is that there are, for instance, a lot of AI-based techniques right now that can do a decent job at predicting, in general, whether someone will pay attention to an ad based solely on the characteristics of the ad. However, they're based mainly on general principles. And so that means that they will always struggle to deal with the attention-grabbing ability of novelty. And novelty in advertising is part of the heart of the creative process. Great campaigns often try to do something new. So I'd argue that to really understand if someone's going to pay attention to content, we need to actually talk to real people and research actual audiences. Now, in terms of measurement, self-report is often used, and it can absolutely measure outcomes such as memorability, but it will never tell us what's going on in the moment as people experience content. So again, I'd argue that we need to use behavioral and biometric measurements to understand those in-the-moment responses. But that itself brings issues because lots of these great biometric methods are really only applicable in the lab. Whereas actually what we want to do is measure in the wild or in consumer research panels to really understand how a campaign will grab attention among the wider audience and across lots of geographies. So that's where computer vision companies and AI companies such as Affectiva can perhaps come in, and techniques from computer vision can be very helpful. Now, as I said earlier, Affectiva is an emotion AI company. That means we've been using facial coding, so showing people advertising and using our algorithms to automatically code their facial expressions to understand their engagement with that content for many years. And we're used by many of the world's largest advertisers. But about 2 years ago, we were acquired by a Swedish company called Smart Eye. Smart Eye you may be familiar with them. They make some of the world's best eye tracking equipment. But for our purposes here, one of the most interesting things is that they're used by many of the world's largest automotive manufacturers to install driver safety monitoring systems in vehicles. So using cameras and eye tracking algorithms to understand if drivers are paying attention while they're driving the vehicle. And many cars in future will have this technology in them. So what we've been able to do as part of that group is bring in those eye tracking algorithms used in automotive safety into the media analytics product so that we can then create a better measure of attention in the media context. So in terms of what that does, how that might work, here's an example of what we've done. So we've begun to include measures into our attention metric that cover a lot of different indicators of consumer inattention. So we're really looking to see, were people distracted or were they actually paying attention to the content? So when, in say, a consumer interview, we play people content that we're interested in, we obviously ask for their consent to be recorded, that's critical, but once they're recorded, we can then use that recording of them to understand attention. And we use signals such as head, pitch, and yaw, so are they orientated towards the content or not? But most importantly, as I said, we're also able to look at where their eyes are moving using those eye tracking algorithms derived from the Smart Eye product. And importantly, that's done without having to make people kind of follow a dot around the screen to start with. So many of you will be familiar with eye tracking research. There's always a calibration phase. This simply comes from a recording of the participant. We also include other measures in there, such as whether somebody's talking to someone else off camera, for instance. We include other measures, such as whether someone looks like they're falling asleep. And also, we can measure things like whether they can't see the screen because they're kind of covering their face, raising a cup, and so on. So we have lots of different signals we can combine to measure whether people are distracted or really paying attention. And I'll show you a quick video that just shows some of those signals at work. You can see my lovely face. The graph on the right shows when attention is high. As I play the video, you'll see it drops down to 0 when there are signals of inattention or distraction. So you see, as I look away there, the signal drops down. I started with attention. We have a video of my colleague Serena here, who's actually looking at content on a second screen, and as she looks away, again, that attention signal drops away. It can work with mobile phones, so here's a colleague just, again, looking away from the mobile phone screen, and we see that attention measure drops. Again, Serena, data collected on a mobile phone. Again, just as she moves her eyes away, we can see that we're picking up those signals. We're also picking up signals from quite difficult scenarios, so looking down at your keyboard is quite hard to pick up, and again, we detect that. Likewise, even if someone's looking away from the screen centrally, we can see where their eyes are moving and understand if they're looking away, or, in this case, talking to someone so clearly not paying attention to the content. Again, pick up slow blinks to indicate drowsiness. And then finally, this example shows, again, if someone obscures their vision of the screen, again, the attention metric drops down. Whereas in this instance, as somebody does the same thing, raises a cup, but you can see one eye is still looking at the screen, the attention metric stays high because we know that she's still looking at the content. So by bringing these signals together, I think you can use computer vision to come up with what is, I think, a very useful signal of attention, but which can be applied at scale across consumer panels and research panels. So that's all well and good, but what does it actually say in terms of advertising effectiveness and what's the meaning for end users? I don't have a long presentation, so I'm only going to show you one example. But this is an ad for True Classic, which tested pretty well. It was a TikTok spot. And what I'll show you as I play the video is how that measure of attention changes over time as people watch the content. So you can see in green, that's actually the average of the total sample. You can see how attention changes, drifting down slightly. But most interesting here is the difference between those who found the ad well-branded, who are the blue line, and those who found the ad less well-branded. And as I play the spot, you'll see that the people who found it hard to understand what the brand was were the ones that paid less attention throughout the content, but in particular, at the end, as branding happens, we see their attention dive down.
I'm so fat.
Brendan, you're not fat. It's the shirt.
Doesn't
Look at
really
Nate.
understand.
His True Classic is tight around the chest and shoulders and arms, and then it tapers off towards the bottom.
Nate also has six-pack abs.
The point is, the shirt doesn't highlight your best attributes.
What are my best attributes?
You're a really good dad.
Yeah, I am.
So there, in particular, at the end, there's end branding. You can see the people that found it hard to get the brand paid much less attention during that moment. So I think there's some really interesting things for the advertising industry and ad research that come from this kind of scaled measure of attention. But before I close, I did want to just come back to a point I raised earlier on, which is there is a difference between looking and seeing. This quote is actually from my daughter's driving instructor. She's recently been learning to drive, and I heard him talk to her about how to use her mirrors properly. And this is just as applicable in the advertising space. Clearly there is a difference between looking at something and really engaging with it and seeing it. And again, the same applies here. Attention is necessary, but it's not always sufficient for advertising effectiveness. We need to measure whether people really engaged with what they saw. And this analysis, I think, is just instructive in that regard. It was an analysis not done by us, but by one of our research partners, which is Kantar. And they took a large number of ads from their advertising pre-testing database, which had a known sales outcome, and then split them up on a number of different measures into high, medium, and low performers. And they looked then at the average sales effectiveness of those ads. And just splitting the ads based on a simple measure of attention, of orientation towards the content, you clearly see, the ads that generate a lot of attention do tend to have higher sales effects. But it's not a huge difference. Whereas if, for instance, we look at a measure of engagement based on whether people showed facial reactions when they watched the content as an indicator that they hadn't just looked at it but really engaged in some way with it, again, we begin to see those differences get bigger. The high performers perform in a better form. And if we also include attitudinal measures, so measures of kind of people's reaction to the advertising messaging, the differences become bigger still. So clearly, attention is important. It's important to measure it, but we need to go beyond that and measure engagement and other reactions. And it's not just Kantar that has been able to show a clear link between engagement with content as shown by facial expressions when the audience watches and sales outcomes. I won't go into this in detail, but the chart on the left is data that we presented at Esomar with Mars a few years ago, showing very clearly that more positive facial reactions when people watch content are linked to positive sales outcomes. And the chart on the right shows recent analysis we did, showing that we can predict the motivational power of advertising messaging, again, based on different facial reactions as people watch. So clearly, engagement is going to count. So I'm nearly at the end of my time, so I'll sum up. Hopefully, we've been able to show that clearly attention really matters. It matters a lot in media, but it's not the only thing. We've also, I think, been able to show that the right way to measure it is with measuring real audiences, real people, not simply a predictive model, though they have a place. But using methods that can be collected at scale with online research panels can then be applied more widely. And again, clearly computer vision can help us generate the right kind of measures of attention. We can combine multiple signals of distraction to create a useful measure. But it's not the only thing that counts. We have to go beyond measuring attention and also measuring engagement. So, did people not just look at content, but did they engage with it? Thanks a lot for your attention. If you want to know more, we're at stand 52, which is just over the fence. Thank you.